I'd like to reconvene the budget hearing, the general fund budget hearing for Clackamas County. This is the time for public testimony on items before the Budget Committee. As we get started, let me just mention a couple of things to you. We do have a timer. If there's a group, I understand, like, for instance, there's one group that's here that's 3 people who would like to speak, so they're all going to come up together. Some of the others, we've tried to put them in groups. So if you wanted to come up together, that's fine. If you prefer to come up individually, we'll deal with that also. It doesn't matter. And I want to make sure you understand I'm going to do the very best job I can on pronouncing everyone's last name. And if I get it wrong, I apologize in advance because, some of them look like I could probably do it and some of them look a little bit challenging. So I just want you to know that. Also, as we get started, I do want to point out that we have 3 pieces of mail and email that will become part of the public record. And so these are being entered. There is one from Glenn Coshern, one from the City of Happy Valley, and one from Wilsonville Parks and Recreation, and those will be part of the public record. So thank you for that. First up, and let me mention also that Roxanne over here is going to be our timer, and she has given me all the cards. If anyone else in the audience would like to testify, please fill out one of the cards and give it to Roxanne so that we can get it in the right queue up here. So first up on tonight's agenda, we have Marge Reinhardt, Mary Clark, and Vicki Whitmore, and you want to speak to us about children of incarcerated parents. And they also have provided us with a written document, and that will also become part of the public record. Thank you very much, ladies. We're going to give you a total of 10 minutes time.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for accommodating us tonight. My name is Marge Reinhardt, and we gave you some easy names to start with, didn't we?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
My name is Marge Reinhardt. I'm a citizen volunteer with Children of Incarcerated Parents. Vicki Whitmore and Mary Clark, who also happen to be our co-chairs, the 3 of us make up our budget subcommittee for budget and funding for our group. So we are a group we've been active in Clackamas County, as Commissioner Schrader can attest, for decades. We ebb and flow, but over the last several years, we have provided services to children and their families who are impacted by parental incarceration. We provide 4 primary programs. We provide Parenting Inside Out, which is an intensive course, set of classes, 12-week course for children who are, for parents who are leaving the penal system in one form or another and are working to get their children, probably reunify with their children, and they enroll in a course that is very intensive that provides parenting skills and life skills to them as they move forward, and that's provided under our auspices through our contractor. We also have a mentoring program. In that, we serve 40 youth in an intensive mentoring with intensive mentoring services, and then provide other sorts of supports and referrals and resources to up to 130 kids as part of that program as well. And I just need to mention, if you have a moment, you might look at KPTV, is that what it, their Be the Change segment featured one of our, the youth who was in our program. She was a couch surfing high school marginal person, who's a young person, whose father was in prison and had been there for much of her life. Her mother was out of her life, and she couch surfed her way through high school. She became involved with our program, and she's just completing her first year at Western Oregon with a 4.0. So we're extremely proud of her, and we have other examples of the mentoring services that we offer too. So we're very proud of that program as well. We run a program called Big Challenges, which operates in elementary schools throughout the county, a few of them. We're hoping to expand that soon. And what that does is give younger children who are impacted by families, by a family incarceration, an opportunity to, first of all, recognize that the stigma they feel, they're not alone. There's other kids in their situation, and they're able to get some supports and resources and coping strategies through this program. And then the fourth program that we do is under the Corrections Substance Abuse Program, or CSAP, which you probably have heard about in some of your other work. That is, we provide in that element, we provide services in the form of family events where we're able to go in. It's an institutional setting, but we're able to go in and provide a party or a tea or a Mother's Day event or whatever, generally tied to a seasonal activity. And so we have a non-threatening environment and setting where we can provide coaching and support for these moms and kids who come in to take part in these events. In a lot of cases, these parents have never parented their children because they've been incarcerated through the entire existence of that child's life. So they're just learning what it's like to have a toddler, which anyone who's had a toddler knows that's not a very easy place to start. So those are the four primary programs that we operate. That one, again, we does operate through the CSAP program. So what we really wanted to talk to you a little bit about tonight is we are partners with several county agencies who have provided us with funding over the course of the last several years. With one exception, none of those funding sources are a sustained funding. So we are in about, as you know, as your budget cycle process starts, so does our work with our agency partners about, will you have money in this year? Will we be able to sustain the work that we've done? Will we be able to meet the unmet need that we have? And how can we move some of that forward? So that means that our program is not stalled, but we're never sure, are we going to be able to continue into the next year at the same level or an increased level? And we have a lot of staff and other resources involved in trying to figure out how we blend the funding that we have. So what we are interested in doing, and I should mention too, we also have some a couple of other sources of funding that we're able to use in other circumstances. So we're not totally reliant on county funds. And actually, one of the things we hope to do is be able to begin to diversify our funding base in any case. But what we're here to ask from you this evening is a sustainable funding level in general funds of $220,000. And what that does is provide the programming that I just described to you. So we're serving, all told, several hundred citizens of the county. We're providing them with the stability that they need. We're meeting a lot of the county goals through that relatively small amount of money. And then the other thing that does from a more administrative level is it gives us the time then to begin to research those other diversifications of funds, so that if we're able to have a baseline funding level, then we can begin to build upon that either through our county partners if they're still able to support some expansion, or by investing the time that we would otherwise spend trying to braid our funding as it is in looking at other funding sources. So I did kind of jump ahead. We weren't sure how much time we would have, but the three documents that we have for you are, am I okay on funding? On timing, by the way. We provided you with, and some of you have already seen this, we provided you with just a 2-page document that describes this is a few months old now, so this was contractual numbers. So when you see that the numbers don't match up entirely, we've exceeded our contractual numbers in a number of areas. But this gives you sort of the overview of what we do and what we're asking for and why. The next document describes not only our, the sort of overview of our committee and its history and structure, but on the left-hand side, I would call your attention to, that's the colored document, that I would call your attention to all of the county, both county government and county nonprofit and other entities who are part of our coalition working to serve these youth, which is one of the ways that we're able to keep our costs as low as we can, so that our return on investment remains quite high, because we're able to leverage a lot of different support from a lot of different people. And then the other one is just a highlights document of some of our accomplishments over the last calendar year. And again, for those of you who will take these side by side, which we'd love to think you will, we also know how busy you are, but if you do, that's why those numbers don't entirely match up, because the first document is pulled from contractual numbers and the other one is the actual numbers that we were able to serve last year. So I don't know if if anybody has anything to add.
I think
or
that you said.
if there's any.
Thank you very much for that. Let me see if any of our committee members have any clarifying questions for you. Commissioner Schrader, I'm sorry, Commissioner Bernard, and then Commissioner Schrader.
I just wanted to say that one of our opportunities here is to look at those budgets in these departments and see if they have funded those, and to make sure that if we want to, they continue funding those and give them some stability, rather than to take the money out of something else.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have and that's a good question that we could have Dawn and staff find out if in the budgets that have been proposed, these amounts have been included.
That's a good question.
That's all.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, I just was hopeful that you would just mention briefly how this program got started with our friend Debbie Marston, and about, I think you have a fund in her name for this
We do.
specific program.
I would
So,
love to. It was so
okay.
hard to figure out what all we could collapse in, and since I tend to expound, I wanted to be careful, but I would love to. Back in the early 2000s, Governor Kitzhaber, in his first set of terms, had asked each county to put together a what do we call it then, though? Not children of incarcerated parents. Governor's reentry group, and that's how we began in this county. Some of you who've been around a while may remember Debbie Martsin. Debbie was a community volunteer extraordinaire. She was very active in many social issues, and one of those was children of incarcerated parents. And she, together with Commissioner Schrader, have really championed this from the very beginning. Debbie passed away
6 or 8 years ago.
6 or 8 years ago, and when she was so invested in this program that she established as part of her wishes before she died to have any contributions in her name go into a fund to support children of incarcerated parents. So we have that fund, and that is where, when I mentioned kind of obliquely some of the other money that we are able to use that isn't quite as tied to, kind of funding sources and that sort of thing. We have a little bit more flexibility with that. And so we have used that money to host biennial summits where we talk about the issues, we raise awareness, we talk with educators and others about what they can do. We bring in national speakers, and we fund that with money through Debbie's endowment. We also have a scholarship established from that endowment at Clackamas Community College for a student who is impacted, is or has been impacted by incarceration. So that has been something that I think Debbie would be very happy about.
We also offer a class at the community
Yes.
college for educators that are working with children who have been impacted by parental incarceration.
Good. Thank you for that explanation. Yeah.
So,
Mr. Magdalene?
How many volunteers do you have?
mentor volunteers, we have, can I turn around and ask my friend?
at this point, 28 one-on-one adults mentoring children, but others.
So,
And in the
If you could-
organization
If,
itself,
was-
if
I'm
you
sorry.
could please repeat
Yes,
that,
yes.
because it's being filmed and.
So we have,
televised,
the
so-
staff in the back, have managed that program, and that was going to be about my estimate, but, so we have 28, formal one-on-one mentors. It is an area that we have a need unmet by mentors. So we're really hoping that if we can get any additional funding, that would be one of the first places that we would want to expand, is to increase our mentoring, recruitment, and training and support.
thank you.
And Commissioner Humberston?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But
Sorry.
He's been
That was a
saying,
good job. Good job. Yes, good job.
it's because he's
I
been saying
basically
Madam
echo,
Chairman.
Commissioner Bernard's approach, just to make sure that you're funding.
Yeah.
I basically echo Commissioner Bernard's approach to assure your funding, but there was a discrepancy in what you said and what's in the document. I just want to clarify. What I see here is that you've had $220,000 worth of funding from the various divisions, as listed in your document. Your request verbally was for $220,000. The request on the second page, however, says $250,000.
So
I need clarification.
yes, you do. We would want, $250,000 would allow us to meet the unmet need of, some of the unmet need. And so the 250,000 was what we would like to have, if at all possible.
So you're actually asking for a
Yes,
confirmation of the initial $220,000 and a request for an additional $30,000, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes, the 220 is these numbers are not yet, these are operating costs from the previous year.
Yeah.
Those are not yet firmed up within each department.
Understood.
So the 250 would be our baseline. Where that was pulled from would obviously be your,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Commissioner Bernard?
So one of the things we're trying to do is focus our investments on specific areas in the county. Can you tell me where most of these kids come from, the general area,
Geographically.
geographic?
they are largely from Milwaukee, the outer Milwaukee area. And
North Clackamas County.
yeah,
Okay.
and we do have several, some, our big challenges groups operate in Oregon City as well, in our lower, our higher poverty rate schools in the Oregon City district.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much. No other comments? We thank you for your testimony this evening. Just
Thank
as
you.
a note of process, next week, we'll be finishing our responsibilities of looking at the budget and determining where monies are spent in this coming year, and hopefully get a budget adopted Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So thank you.
thank you,
Time.
Chair Parks and the committee. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you, ladies.
The next is Ed Hendricks, and he would like to speak to us about the enhanced law enforcement budget, jail beds specifically.
Great.
And if you'd give us your name and address, please. I think I neglected to say that for the ladies, but we have their information, so.
Good afternoon. My name is, actually, it's Eric Hendricks.
Oh, Eric. Boy, I got the first name wrong
Got the
this
first
time.
name
Sorry
wrong.
about
That's
that.
usually, it's usually the last name. My name's Eric Hendricks. My address is 10282 Southeast Bristol Court, Happy Valley. Good afternoon, Chair Bernard, Commissioners, Madam Chair, and members of the Clackamas County Budget Committee. I'm Eric Hendricks, the chairperson of the Enhanced Law Enforcement District Advisory Committee. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to discuss a matter which we believe is critical to the safety of our residents in our district. The purpose of the Enhanced Law Enforcement District is to increase the level of sheriff's patrols to meet the added demands of providing service to urban Clackamas County. The service district serves approximately 85,000 residents in the unincorporated areas of Clackamas County within the urban growth boundary, and it includes the incorporated city of Johnson City. Last year, a little more than half of the calls for service that deputies responded to across the county took place within the boundaries of our district. The advisory committee is composed of 11 residents of the service district from a variety of backgrounds. Our purpose is to assist Sheriff Roberts with identifying public expectations for the district and the support of Sheriff's Office outreach functions. Our committee is also tasked with recommending service priorities and issues for the district to the Board of County Commissioners through the sheriff, and that's what brings us here today. This spring, Sheriff Roberts' command staff made us aware of a critical public safety issue facing citizens of the district that we wish to speak about today, and that's the practice of forced releases of inmates from the Clackamas County Jail. We were surprised to learn that more than 2,800 inmates were released early from jail last year. That's an average of nearly 8 inmates every day. Some of these inmates were charged with serious crimes, including unlawful use of a motor vehicle. We believe the primary responsibilities of the criminal justice system are to ensure public safety and to hold offenders accountable for their actions. We believe the practice of forced releases of inmates from our jail defeats that primary purpose of holding offenders accountable and makes citizens and their property in the county less safe. We have learned the practice of forced inmate releases is a short-term response to overcrowding in an outdated, aging, and undersized county jail originally built a long time ago in 1959. The jail has been expanded several times over the years to its current capacity of 491 inmates. However, we know that 26 beds of this facility are not currently being used due to lack of adequate funding. Statewide statistics clearly show the lack of adequate capacity at our county jail. Of the state's largest 10 counties, only 2, Washington and Lane, have fewer jail beds per 1,000 population. Not surprisingly, both of those counties also utilize the forced release of inmates as a practice here in our county jail. To be clear, our committee does not believe that incarceration is the sole way of gaining accountability from offenders. The Clackamas County Community Corrections Transition Center, with its emphasis on employment, drug treatment, and mental health counseling, is an excellent example of alternatives to incarceration. On the other hand, we know that every inmate is not eligible or suited for this alternative program. Still, we feel strongly that additional inmate beds are imperative now to help ensure the safety of our community. We also believe that opening these additional county jail beds will help strengthen accountability in the criminal justice system in the eyes of offenders and citizens alike. In order to meet these goals, appropriate funding needs to be allocated to open currently unused inmate beds in our jail. The Enhanced Law Enforcement District Advisory Committee strongly supports and advocates for Clackamas County to fund adequate staffing levels to open these 26 unused beds. Full funding would also allow a larger dormitory for female inmates and additional beds for inmates requiring mental health or medical services. We strongly believe that unused jail beds in an already undersized facility is neither responsible or in the best interests of the public. In closing, while we acknowledge and appreciate your recommendations for partial funding of this proposal in next budget year, we strongly recommend that Clackamas County fully fund all 26 unused beds in our jail system and make such funds available this coming year. We need to begin the process of ensuring that all beds in our jail are eligible to house inmates. Thanks very much for your attention today.
Thank you. And we have comment from Commissioner Salas.
Commissioner?
Questions, comments?
Thank you for coming here today. I know that when we went out for the last sheriff's levy, one of my suggestions was that we would ask for maybe a little bit more money to actually for this purpose, along with some others, and which is a lot easier than actually dissolving the enhanced law enforcement and going out for more money, you know, in some kind of a measure that would actually augment it, keep the district alive, but with a new tax rate. So, and of course, we're stressed for dollars. There's far more need than there are dollars, as always. So I was wondering if you had any ideas in order to augment funding to meet that need, if you felt that maybe the next time we go out for a public safety levy, that we do it there, or increasing the ask for the enhanced law enforcement district, the tax rate.
I think those are both possibilities. I do. And I think the sheriff's office could certainly make the case for that. You know, there's a lot of issues in the public that garner headlines. I'm not certain that many Clackamas County residents really know just how old their jail is and how undersized it is compared to other jails around the state.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers, and I told you what the numbers are, our jail is, per 1,000 population, it is quite small.
Yeah. We have a couple bottlenecks in the courthouse, and having, you know, enough courtrooms to prosecute something is also another bottleneck in the system as well. So it's one thing to hold them, but it's another one to actually process them through the system. So we have some bottlenecks we need to solve, and I don't know how we accomplish that without some big investments.
I understand that. Thank you.
Mr. Magdalene and then Commissioner Bernard.
Now, I looked at some of the material that was given to us,
Uh-huh.
and I noted that Washington County has 15% fewer beds per
Yes.
1,000. And why is there, has anybody gone over there and found out what Washington County's doing, that they have such a lower forced release rate?
I'll be frank, I can't answer that question. I would imagine that somebody from the sheriff's office could answer that question, but I'm a retired police officer. I was an assistant chief for the police bureau in Portland. I had a 28-year career there. And as you know, crime rates from counties vary, sometimes quite significantly. I can't speak to the issues there, and I did notice that. But I think the most important thing is that they're forcing inmate relations like we are here. That's what I do know.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So
Commissioner Bernard.
my comment really is, even if we funded this today, it would take probably a year or two to hire the staff. That's the biggest problem. I think what we could do today is if we set some money aside, we tell the sheriff to start ramping up hiring, which, you know he's ramping up hiring. He just gets caught up and then falls back when people retire. So it's a big challenge, and I don't know what kind of staff funding he's got in his budget now, and that's what we really got to look at. And these beds were built a long time ago. I remember funding it, and I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but the current survey says that housing is the most important thing. Homelessness is important, and providing mental health services, because the biggest problem in the jail is mental health. Our jails have become mental health facilities.
Yes, they have. in part.
And so, when do you invest? Do you invest to keep people out of jail and their mental health, make them healthy, or do you wait until they're in jail and provide that service? That's the thing we have to weigh. And I think that wraparound services that we're looking at in the other budget could help lower that count. And, I won't be here long enough to fund a jail. I look forward to that happening someday. But part of the problem with the jail is also what Paul mentioned. People are delayed in the jail because, in the jail because we don't have the courtrooms to process them. Mm-hmm. And so it's just this mixed bag of a bunch of stuff. I've also never been a fan of so many officers per 1,000 or jail beds per 1,000. I hope that in our funding for mental health, we can reduce our dependency on jail beds. But again, we have to look, we haven't met with the sheriff's yet on his budget. And we'll talk about how many positions he has funded, how many he's hired, and you know, what the possibilities of hiring for those beds are. And I go to all of his, most of his swearing in, and I know it takes a long time to get those people through that training. So, yeah, we've got to start ramping up, but I don't know that we can do it all this year. But thanks for testifying.
Chair Bernard, if I can comment,
Yes.
I can assure you that there's 6 gentlemen out in the lobby that are waiting to be hired, but on the other hand, like you said, it's a complex problem. It is, and it's certainly jailing people is not the only answer. I started my career actually working in the Multnomah County Jail more years ago than I want to admit. But on the other hand, opening these 26 beds, like I said, it does offer the opportunity for medical and mental health beds inside the jail. And that's something we should certainly take a look at.
That's what it was built for.
It was.
Mental health.
So,
For sure. Mr. Feely?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so you all know, I left a question with Diane before I left this afternoon to ask the sheriff to respond to what action steps would be needed in that to get the staff on board by the beginning of that 3rd year of funding. And it does take 18 months to hire, recruit, hire, train, send to certification a deputy sheriff. So you're right, it's a long time.
Unless we can steal them from.
Well, yeah, unless you can get a transfer from
But that
somewhere
doesn't
else.
shorten it
But my fear
totally.
is if this 3-year approach may end up being a 4.5-year approach if we just wait 3 years and start to hire people. So, you know, I just want to make one other point. As a victim of a property crime in Clackamas County this last year, we don't even respond to it. It gets turfed to the telephone report unit, and they were kind of like, well, you sure you want to file a telephone report? You know, at that point, forget it. So there's a lot of crime going on that doesn't even get responded to, and people are beginning to become aware of that, and probably the bad guys are equally aware of it. So just something to keep in mind.
I can just make one additional comment, Chair, and Tom, thanks. I did talk to Captain Rhodes just a couple of minutes ago, and he did let me know that there is a current eligibility list for corrections officers, and he has a number of officers in that hiring process, backgrounding, physicals. I'll let them speak to the details of it, but there is a current eligibility list that they're be able to hire off of.
Yeah, we'll be talking to them Tuesday, right?
Yeah, Tuesday morning, we have them. I believe it's the first program on, or first department on Tuesday morning. Yeah. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks very much.
For coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Mr. Hendricks.
We have 4 cards from folks who would like to speak about NAMI. So Michele Vinkor, would you like to have all of your folks come up at once? So we have Michele Vinkor, Gary Marshall,
Marshke.
Close, very close. I want you to know it took me more tries than that to
Laura-
get it right myself.
Laura Canida,
Canada like the
and,
country, but close.
and Nicole.
They're back on the.
Oh, thank you. You're here to talk to us about NAMI
And Nikki Pantley.
and mental health.
Yes.
And name and addresses, please.
Okay. My name is Michele Vinkor, and I'm going to use the NAMI addresses, which is 10202 Southeast 32nd Avenue, Suite 501, Milwaukee, Oregon, 97222. I want to first of all thank you, Madam Chair, commissioners, and the Budget Committee for your time tonight. I've got to tell you, no matter how many times I do that, I'm always a little nervous, so I'm a little shaky or stumble over my own tongue like I just did. Please excuse that. First thing I want to do is I was able to come yesterday and listen to Rich Swift give the budget proposal for the Health, Housing, and Human Services, as well as the Behavioral Health budget. And I want to commend them for the work that they're doing. They are doing amazing work in our county, and they were able to provide you with a couple of good examples of some of that work. But I also want to point out about the lack of funding. And we just heard from Jim Bernard that some of our ways to keep people out of the jails, which have become one of our #1 housing units for mental health issues, and get them the treatment, the housing, and the other things that they need. So a couple of things that you might know or not know. There are approximately 12,908 adults in Clackamas County with severe mental health issues. So those aren't including the people who can get up and go to work. Those are not including the people who may have some situational. These are people with severe health issues that keep them from their daily activities. Something else that you might not be aware of if you haven't done the math is that our behavioral health budget is only 0.799, so less than 0.8% of your total discretionary funds in the general fund. So what I am here to ask you is not specifically to give NAMI money, not specific, although I am going to talk about one of our programs briefly, but to ask you to consider increasing the amount of money from your general funds, not taking it from another program, not taking it from another, especially another health, housing, and human services program, but increasing that money that you guys are investing in behavioral health and in housing. So a couple other things that you might want to know. Did you know that the suicide rate in Clackamas County is higher than both Multnomah County and Washington County? Did you know that it's our #2 reason for the death of adolescents between 14 and 24? That we have 17.4 deaths per 100,000 from suicide every year, and about 25 times that many who attempt. Suicide rates are climbing, while other things like HIV, AIDS, heart disease, stroke are all going down. Did you know, I look at this group here, that older men over 65 are the greatest risk of suicide? So, yeah.
I'm well past there.
And did you know that just recently we had a group of students got together and did surveyed 42 different schools, and the #1 issue in our schools is a lack of access to mental health services. So those are just things I want you to consider as you're choosing your budget, choosing some of your discretionary funds, whether they're this year or on coming years. Jeff, yesterday you were talking about too, what do we have in place that can assist in the schools? How do we get people to identify? How do we get people to react? So one of the things that I sent with you is a program that we have recently started called Ending the Silence. Usually you have to speak right into it. Ending the Silence, we have been doing it now for a couple of years. We tried to get every school in Clackamas County. We have not been able to for a variety of reasons. Probably the #1 is lack of staff and volunteers. That program goes into the schools. We talk to junior high and high school students. We talk to them about what are the symptoms of both mental health issues and suicidality. Where do you go to get help? Who do you talk to? And then we bring, and this is the kicker, we bring a young adult, someone who's under 35, someone who can speak to them, who has a mental health issue, to come and talk to them about their journey and offer them hope and help. Our evaluations, both on a national level and on a local level, have shown that these students feel more comfortable about talking about mental health. They might feel more comfortable about who they go and talk to. And this year, if we can pull it off, again, funding's an issue, we would like to expand that program, which is brand new with NAMI, to a similar program. It's about a 90-minute program for parents and for teachers. We talked about yesterday a mental health, or we didn't talk, but it was talked about mental health first aid and how hard it is to get into the schools because it's a whole day program. This is 90 minutes of a teacher's time or a cafeteria workers or a teacher's aide to learn a little bit. Just get that enough so that they know when they need to identify and say, hey, I think somebody has an issue. We've been able to connect young people with ESA, which is an early psychosis program. We had one young lady who told us, I was suicidal when I came in here. Thank you, you have helped. So it works. The other thing that we are really concerned about is housing. It's probably the number one unmet need that people come to us for. When they come to us usually in crisis, whether that is family members or whether that is people with mental health issues. It is so bad that I actually had someone call up and say, we want to give you a house. And we said, oh, that's wonderful. We can sell it. We can get some money. No, we want to give you a house because we can no longer take care of our senior adult who has a mental health issue in our home. We are going to assisted living, and we want them to be able to stay in that home. And then you can have it. And of course, we don't have the facilities or I'll talk to my own experience. My daughter recently faced homelessness. She has MS, she has epilepsy, and she has mental health issues. When we called to try to get her some housing, when we called the coordinated access line, we were told that she hadn't been homeless long enough to even qualify for a wait list. So when I talked to Central City Concern not too long ago about coming out here to build housing, they told us that they needed some commitment from the county too, because the kinds of funds they had would not cover 100% of the housing. So those are the things. I guess I just want you to realize that you have a smaller percentage of your general funds, your accessible general funds, allocated to behavioral health than the other surrounding counties, and encourage you to rethink that and increase that. If NAMI can benefit from some of those, of course, we would love that. But either way, we need your help in behavioral health and in housing. And I'd like to be able to ask some of my colleagues to talk about their experiences.
Hi, my name is Nicole Pantley, and I live at 1144 Hughes Street in Oregon City, 97045. And I'm here as one of the 12,908 people living with a serious mental illness before my recovery. So now I'm one of those other numbers that's not included in there because I've received the help that I needed. I am a NAMI family-to-family peer connection facilitator. I'm a family-to-family teacher. I am a peer support specialist. I am a qualified mental health associate at a private company, and I'm a certified drug and alcohol counselor now. I wouldn't be any of these without the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And I'm gonna cry, sorry. And the funding that's needed, because when you're sick, you can't work and you can't house yourself. And without free services such as this, I wouldn't have all the credentialing and little letters behind my name now that make my stigma not as bad as it was. So the 4 big letters in my life now are the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And I just would like to say that we need funding so bad, because this number that I just learned today, the $954,437, to get me where I am, my treatment experience has cost over $400,000 between 7 hospitalizations, multiple things, and every time I was let out of the hospital, I had nowhere to go or what to do. It wasn't until one accidental visit at Brookside at Kaiser. It was a visiting day, and none of my family showed up because they were so used to finding me there, that someone from the National Alliance of Mental Illness came, and they told me what to do after I got out. And because of that, many years later, I sit here now, helping and serving people in the community on a daily basis. I not only work in a drug and alcohol treatment facility as a qualified mental health associate serving dual diagnosis, but I also work in a residential treatment facility as an overnight counselor, just covering hours for people. Myself alone, people can't even get an appointment with me for up to 3 months. I'm booked out till August. That's how big the need is, and I'm in the private sector. So I am here to implore you to spend more of your general funds on behavioral health, on housing, because we are worth it. Our gray matter matters, and when we get better, we do incredible things. Thank you.
I don't know if we have enough time
Laura, you get 3 minutes each.
Hi, I'm Laura Canada, 13142 Southeast 125th Avenue in Clackamas, Oregon. I come to you today not only as a board member from NAMI, a community volunteer, but also a mom of one of those 12,000 people that has been in and out of the hospitals. And if it wasn't for the hospitals taking care of my son, he'd be homeless. He tried living on his own, ended up back in the hospital with the great care of the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office and their behavioral health unit that convinced him that he had to go back to the hospital, but then was released by the county person that came in to do the assessment that spent 2 minutes with him. And she didn't care if he was homeless or not. She says, we deal with homeless people all the time. It doesn't matter if he doesn't have a place to go. It's not our responsibility. It's not our problem. So the option for him was to be homeless because he lost his apartment because he was in the hospital so long, or come back home, which of course, a 27-year-old kid does not want to come back home and live with their parents. But that's what's happened. And thank goodness he has us, because if he didn't have us, he would be homeless and he would not be getting services because he's on Medicare, and Medicare does not provide extra services. So I'm just here as a mom to you guys to just implore you to however you can put funds to mental health, whether it's for services, support, housing, because we desperately need housing, but in any way, and we all know that it's a countrywide issue, not just here in Clackamas County. I just implore you to do whatever you can to help, because what you do today could help my son in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
And my name is Gary Marshke. I think I've had the pleasure of meeting most of you at one particular point in time in some context. I will also give you the NAMI address, 10202 Southeast 32nd Avenue, number 501 in Milwaukee. And while I work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Clackamas, I'm not here on company time. I'm also not here about money. While that's the ultimate end result of any budget hearing, I think the process starts with priorities. Nothing reflects your values like how you spend your money. Others have already told you about our priorities. They've given you their stories. They've given you the context of what's occurred now. NAMI Clackamas is celebrating their 40th anniversary this year. And things looked a lot different back in 1978. Nostalgically, and I know particularly there's one commissioner that'll appreciate that, we said goodbye to things like the Carol Burnett Show in Colombo, Norman Rockwell, Louis Prima, Hubert Humphrey, the Panama Canal, and the Women's Army Corps, and we said hello to things like the Susan B., a movie called Animal House, and believe it or not, 1978, the first computer bulletin board. At least according to Billboard magazine, we were listening to things like the Bee Gees, the Commodores, and Debbie Boone. You could get a gallon of gasoline for, guess how much, 63 cents, a dozen eggs for 48 cents, and an 8-track tape player for the low price of 189 bucks. Clackamas County had about 229,000 people back then, and just 3 commissioners. Leading causes of death, you've heard, heart disease, cancer, not politics, and suicide ranked well down the list at less than 2% of all the deaths statewide. We had about 15% of the population nationally that was affected by what was then called mental disorders. That's just under 35,000 folks here in Clackamas County back then. Suicide was considered a sin and still a crime in some states. Housing was scarce. We shifted from institutions to communities without funding to back it up. Homeless stats are pretty hard to find and even harder to quantify back then around mental disorders. So fast forward. We've got now 377,702 people in Clackamas County, and count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 commissioners. Right? We also have leading causes of death still being heart disease and cancer, but suicide is now the 8th leading cause of death in Oregon, except among our youth, where it happens to be, as you probably heard, the number 2 cause of death among youth between ages 10 to 24. More than 20% of our population will deal with mental illness this year. That's more than 75,000 Clackamas County residents. That's more than double 1978's numbers. And virtually all of them have family members, loved ones, friends who are also affected. That's everyone. Statistically, almost 20,000 of them are either housing challenged or homeless. Who knows how that compares with 78, because we don't really have any figures, but I'd venture to guess it's significantly higher. Mental illness is estimated to cost businesses $225 billion each year. That's $1,000 plus per employee affected by mental illness. And that includes parents, family members, and loved ones. That's everyone. So we know that recovery from mental illness is a process, not an outcome. It requires a lifelong commitment by everyone affected. So in that context, consider how far we've come since 1978. Recognize that we've taken many positive steps to destigmatize and actually treat mental illness in a more holistic manner. Then, before we get tired of patting ourselves on the back, consider how far we have yet to go. One of my favorite quotes from the college days that I remember is from Kierkegaard. He says, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." In that spirit, I ask you to consider the opportunities you have ahead, set your priorities accordingly. I love alliteration, so your it's three H's, holistic, humane, and housed. Act for mental health. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any clarifying questions or anything? Mr. Savage?
I just want to just say thank you for the service you provide and all your work on behalf of those out there that need help.
Can I add one thing? Since my treatment, I haven't occupied a bed in Multnomah County Jail or Clackamas County Jail. I occupy my own now. And I haven't incurred one medical bill.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. You know, I've been a friend of NAMI for a long time, ever since Michele introduced me to it years ago. You know, so you guys have done some really remarkable projects and done some great work for folks.
And can I add that, you were talking about volunteers, that we're highly volunteers. Our whole budget is about $250,000, and we have about 100 volunteers. And the Ending the Silence is just one very, very small part of what we do.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have a couple down here too. So Commissioner Schrader and then Commissioner Bernard.
I just also want to thank you for all that you do. My question is, one of the groups that we work with as well as you folks is Lines for Life. And I imagine you folks work with them on their youth program for suicide prevention and
We
the
don't. We
training they do?
support, we do a lot of referrals and put out information about them, but we don't work directly with them.
Okay. No, I've been intrigued because they're trying to actually expand that component of it because of the information you just gave us tonight with this explosion of
young people. And we do, as part of our Ending the Silence program, we give each student, and we will, as we get parents and school workers, a little card they can put in their wallet that has some of those resources on them so that they will have them. And crisis service resources are a huge one that we say, don't keep it a secret. Make sure somebody knows, because that's the first step, ending that stigma and getting the folks to speak up, especially our young people.
Thank you.
Well,
Commissioner Bernard.
We're doing some wonderful things differently, and one was a meeting we had with the school districts to talk about this issue and the many issues we have, safety in schools. But Stephen Loiza, I don't know if you remember him, but he
was
used
before
to,
my time, but he has a wonderful legacy that he's left.
Yes, he used to rent a building from me for many years, and he, taught me a lot about the importance of mental health. And I mean, this is what our plan is. The H3S is $1.2 million in housing wraparound services, and I think it's important that you could have ended up in jail, or you did, and you would not have been there had you had the services you needed beforehand. So what I was shocked about is the suicide rate amongst 8th graders. I was shocked when I heard that. I remember being an 8th grader, and that was not something that ever occurred to me. Times have changed. There's a lot more stress, and I think that we're making some great strides. And I think with Richard Swift and his team and the investments that we're considering, we will be successful, and we'll certainly make a dent. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Commissioner Humberson.
Yeah. I'm just taking a quick glance backwards, so I'm not sure I got this entirely right, but Health, Housing, and Human Services is at least 143 million, almost 144 million dollars of the budget is. So we are definitely investing in the needs that people have in this community, and I think we are we're reaping the consequences of a decision made in the 60s and during the Reagan administration, both as a governor and as a president, to close institutional settings. And admittedly, some of them should have been closed. I mean, they certainly weren't healthy places. And no substitute for how we're going to take care of it. So it ends up in the sheriff's department's hands, as I'm sure you're well aware. The thing that's striking to me is what the gentleman said regarding suicide in '78 and what it is today. Do you have any sense of cause? Is it because it wasn't reported back then and we didn't know? Or is it really truly something that has dramatically increased because of something going on in society?
You know, I think there's probably a lot of reasons, and I'm just extrapolating from my experience, not that I have any data to pass it, but I think that things were unreported back then. Certainly, even death certificates weren't reporting things. There was a stigma involved. And we don't even know today a lot of deaths, whether they're a suicide or not. So we might indicate they're an overdose or something else if we don't have anything. So that's when stresses, especially our students, you look at our what they talk about, and they talk about some of the standardized testing and the push to be in college and to exceed and succeed. We know that has caused some additional anxieties and stresses in our students. So I think I don't think there's a single, like so many things, one answer to what's going on in our community. But and it's interesting because those numbers, though, do reflect across the United States and across the world. We do have a higher suicide rate here in Clackamas County than the national average and than our average in Oregon. But the problem persists and exists across the nation.
And, you know, my answer to your question would be, really a simple yes. It's all of the above. One of the things that I jotted down while Michele was talking is that currently the #1 diagnosed mental illness among incoming undergraduates is anxiety. Mm-hmm. And now, I don't know the last time you saw a student loan bill, but I think that's probably one of the big reasons. But there's a lot of issues that didn't exist. We didn't have social media back in 1978. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the quick fixes and the instant hits that we have now. So we weren't trying to process as much information. I just saw some information recently that said that the brain processing speed among kids under 15 has gone up some 2 or 3% over what the previous generation's brain processing speed was prior. So I think there's a lot going on that didn't occur in '78, not the least of which is just the entire environment that we lived in.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
The exception is Ken's brain, I think, is 5 times faster.
Faster the better. Faster the better.
Thank you very much for your presentation this evening. As you know and you've heard, we'll be looking at budget considerations on Tuesday of next week, and we hope that that's a day when we're able to wrap it up. If not, we'll be back on Wednesday also. So.
We may be too.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next, we have discussing housing and housing alternatives, homelessness, and that type of thing. Martha Mclennan and Ellen Burns. Welcome. Good to see you.
Madam Chair, we should probably congratulate Ellen Burns for her award last evening.
Yes. Oh, can you explain a little bit more, please?
Ellen, would you?
I was humbled to receive the Community Impact Award for distinguished individual from the county last night. So.
And what
Hey, Ellen, I can't. Is your microphone on?
It's on. I'm sorry.
Is it just? You have a throat problem right now?
And the reason she explained why she got the award is she goes to meetings, lots of meetings. means
Distinguished
she's
Citizen Award.
involved.
Yeah, she won the Distinguished Citizen Award from the Community Impact Committee, right?
Action.
The
Action Committee,
Impact.
Action Board.
Community,
yes.
oh, okay, the Community Action Group. Well, congratulations on that, and thank you for taking the time to be here this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's some water for you.
You want to go ahead?
Nice, okay.
Okay. So good evening. I'm Martha Mclennan. I'm Executive Director of Northwest Housing Alternatives and wanted to come tonight to talk to you about housing and homelessness. So first, I want to applaud the County Board for the work that they've done over the last couple of years in terms of learning more and more about the affordable housing issue and how they have shared that learning with elected officials across the county. I think that's very important. I think we're at an exciting time and have high hopes that the Metro Board will refer to the voters a measure to provide some capital resources for affordable housing. If that happens, that will be able to provide a significant number of additional affordable housing units in Clackamas County. So I wanted to start with that. And then I want to thank the board. I think within your base budget, there's funding for our programs in a number of different places that echo some of the needs that you've heard about already this evening. There is some money in the behavioral health budget that supports our Pathways program, which provides rapid rehousing services for mental health consumers. There is money in the Health and Human Services budget, both in community development and in social services, with county general fund dollars that supports our home-based program. There's also funding that's pass-through funding from the state and the federal government to support that program. And that is also providing eviction prevention and rapid rehousing services. One of the policy ad packages that you have or under consideration this year is the $1.2 million. And I am hopeful that you will support that. In the discussion of it, in the materials, it sounds like some of that funding is pretty clearly targeted, but some is a little bit open-ended. And so I wanted to comment just briefly on some of the thoughts and that you should take into consideration as you fully program those resources. The first is the principle of shoring up and making sure that the systems and structures that you have in place are strong, to make sure that the programs that we currently have can be strong and stable moving forward. The second is to really think about the programs as a continuum. There are so many housing needs in the county. And so many needs for people experiencing or at risk of homelessness in the county. And it's really difficult to figure out how to create a full continuum out of that. But I think that's the challenge. So rather than looking for innovations all the time, rather than looking for pilot programs all the time, thinking about how to build from one system to the next to the next. So when we have shelter, we need to have a plan to exit people from shelter. When they've exited from shelter, we need to have a plan to stabilize them in housing. Some of the funding you have is described in that way, and I would just tell you that's an incredibly good investment. When we have folks who are in housing, they may have high housing expense burdens, they may have challenges in retaining that housing, but very, very small investments of funds can keep them in that housing longer. And any extension of the period that people are housed is going to improve their health, it's going to improve their educational attainment, their employment attainment, their staying away from the criminal justice system. So all of these systems benefit by having people in housing. I would be happy to answer any questions, but again, applaud your work and look forward to, oh, just one more thing before I go. The campus housing, we're going to be breaking ground very, very soon. We're going to start demolition at our campus in Milwaukee within a week. And we're going to be inviting you all to come to a groundbreaking ceremony in about a month. So we'll look forward to getting that on your calendars. And then number two, our Pleasant Avenue Veterans Housing Project now has all of the funding secured and the land use approved, and we expect to break ground on that project in September.
Great news. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to comment that Martha's an expert. I mean, she's if you ever want to find out anything about housing, she's the person to go to. She's done a lot of development, a lot of variety all over, and one thing I'd like to look, when we look at the budget and some of those things you mentioned of the 1.2 million is making sure that we focus on those stages of homelessness versus stabilizing people. And I think that's why the wraparound part with NAMI and other groups that is key. Keeping people in a home and out of jail or homeless, I mean, it's pretty simple. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, Mr.
I
Caton?
have a question. I was just wondering, you mentioned a continuum of homelessness and stuff, and I was wondering about elaborating a little bit more about that, and how would you prioritize the homeless or housing situation in that population? How would you prioritize dealing with them and their capacity of need?
So the first place that I think we need to be investing resources is eviction prevention. We have a lot of folks who are in housing, they're stressed in that housing, and a simple illness, mechanical problem with a car, loss of tools to go to work, any number of things can trip folks up and send them spiraling into homelessness. And very, very small amounts of funding can keep them in housing. So when we do eviction prevention, we may pay rent for a month or two. We may pay some utility bills. We may help somebody negotiate a payment plan with a landlord for back rent. But when we do that, 85% of those people are still housed a year later. And a year later, if the 15% come back and ask for another few $100s, it's still a good investment, right? So stop the flow of people into homelessness to begin with. Once people are actually homeless, if they are not in shelter, if they're doubled up in couch surfing, try to get them directly back into homelessness from that place. Don't make them come into a shelter system and then work their way out of it. So that's, again, an upstream, catch them upstream. If they're on the streets, get them into shelter, and then get them out of shelter and into permanent housing as quickly as is possible. We know that there are tens of thousands of households who pay more than 50% of their income towards rent. But a lot of the housing systems are based on people paying 30% of their income for rent. That's a more ideal situation, but maybe not a strategy that we can afford. So if we say, okay, I'm going to get you at that 50% level, I'm going to know that you're clinging by your fingernails. But again, I'm going to have a resource to catch you periodically if something blows up. That doing that, you can serve, 50, 60, 70% more people. And that's going to be important because there are really not enough resources. Once you get them into stable housing, again, keep them in stable housing. Do everything you can. We have resident service coordinators at our properties. A lot of what they do is eviction prevention. We have almost 1,900 units statewide, and last year we had 7 evictions, and actually 6 evictions and 7 more households who we said, if you don't leave, you're going to have an eviction on your record, so you ought to leave now. So 13 out of 1,900 units all last year. So keeping people in the housing is really, really important. The biggest subsidy, both in Oregon and at the federal level for housing, is not for affordable housing. By a big measure, it's the mortgage interest deduction. So we spend a lot of money on homeowners and helping them buy homes and stay in homes, but we don't spend a lot of money on helping renters. The federal budget now for affordable housing is less than it was in 1986. And that's why
You've seen the state stepping up with more programs. That's why the Metro bond is critically important, because we're not getting the resources from the federal government. We need to get the resources from other places, and we need to be building more housing as much as we can.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you
that.
so much. Not seeing any other questions or comments, so we thank you for your time tonight. And as you know, we'll be working on the budget next week.
Yep.
So we thank you, and we'll take your ideas into consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Ellen.
Hi. I'm Ellen Burns. I'm at 7550 Charlotte Court in Gladstone. And I'm here to talk about housing as well as the last two groups of speakers, because housing is such a tremendous problem. And, I would just like to reiterate as well that there needs to be a progression out of housing. I first would like to thank you all because of your I have seen you at many different venues where we have talked about housing, and for your interest in housing, particularly the houseless people, and that's what I want to talk about today. Is that transitional housing, looking at getting people off of the streets and safe and just out of the elements. I volunteer with the Aging Services Advisory Council. We had this year a 92-year-old woman living in her car. It just seems like in this country, in this time, that should not be possible. But those are things that are happening. I volunteer for the SUN program, the Sheltering Our Neighbors, which is a program that houses families 2 weeks at a time. How unsettling is that, to have children moving from church to church every 2 weeks, only in the wintertime? I don't know where these kids go in the summertime. I guess they'll go camping. I'm also have advocated for the veterans transitional housing, and with MACG, and we in Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good. I tell people I'm ashamed to say I'm working very hard so that people can live in their cars in church parking lots. That is a step forward that this county has made, so that people at least have a safe place to park those cars, or to perhaps set up the Conestogas that many of you saw at our open house that we had for that. So I'm asking that we really take into consideration this just transitional housing, which is not the ideal, but at least get people off the streets, get people out from under the bridges. We have a great opportunity right now. We have Providence Healthcare, which has interested and has money because they don't want to be discharging people from their emergency room to under the bridge. And so they are working with MACG. And this is, as Chair Bernard has talked about many times, this is an opportunity for the private, government, volunteer, and faith community alliance and coordination to build an agency, meaning a group working together to help with this problem and support this with funding and wraparound services, as we've talked about. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Savas. Excuse me, Commissioner Savas has a comment or
Yes, I want to just thank Ellen and others with MACG and some of our faith-based groups, and having that open house as well. They've come to us over the last year and a half, 2 years, and meeting with them. And one of the, actually on practically, I won't say zero cost, because there's always cost in actually processing any kind of zoning change or ordinances. But one of the things we've come up with is creating ideally in the future, allowing by code this car camping, a limited number on some of the faith-based facilities, so they can make investments and be within compliance. and just to bridge that transition to get them back on their feet. So we have great partners available that are out there wanting to do it, and for us just to allow that in our code doesn't really cost us a lot of money, but the benefit and the impact is huge, and it's been very successful in Wayne County as well. So just want to just highlight that, and again, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much, Ellen. We appreciate it. We have another speaker on housing, Alicia Howard. Come on up to the microphone.
Sorry, we came late. We had a fall through, so they had us come from the drop-in center. We're from Youth Era, Clackamas County. We have a drop-in center in Milwaukee.
Could you give us your name and address?
Oh,
please,
yes,
first, please?
Alicia Howard, and I guess the address for the drop-in is...
It's 11097. It's Southeast 21.
Is that microphone on? Is the blue light on?
Is it on?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so it's 11097 Southeast 21 Avenue. It's downtown Milwaukee. And the organization we work for is Youth Era. Both of us are peer support specialists. So we work for anybody with mental health. Lately, we've just been noticing a lot of housing issues, just a lot of specific male, LGBT.
Yeah. So we work with ages 14 to 25, which is the transitional youth, which there's a huge break in service for them. But we're really seeing a lot of need in like our 24 up, 24, 25, because, they start aging out of programs and they don't have anywhere to go. The programs are for like 23 and under. And so we have a lot of youth that, the vulnerable youth, like we see a lot of people aging out of foster care, so, I mean, that's a huge majority of who we see. And they have nowhere to go, and just some of the mental health that, make them stumble, and, they have a hard time when they don't have anywhere to sleep at night, and they stay awake all night and try to find places to sleep during the day. And then it makes it hard for them with their health in general. I have a youth with a sleep apnea, and he has nowhere to plug his machine in, and getting disability is really hard for him. But just being able to, I'm pretty sure you guys have touched on a lot of the subjects, we came in late, so I apologize for that. But,
It's okay.
Housing is big, getting services for people so they can actually get on their feet, because they're motivated. These weren't things that they, these are things that happened to them. They didn't choose to be homeless. They didn't, and they're having a hard time getting, I feel like having a housing situation would help a lot with them being able to, get a job, focus on their health, getting healthy so they can continue working. Just having that stability is really important and really key on getting them, up in the world. Was there anything else?
I don't think you covered everything.
Yeah, but I want to thank you guys for funding our drop-in center. It's
Thank
a
you.
great resource, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much for being here tonight. We appreciate that you came out to us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and watch for results next week when we see what we end up with. So,
Yes, thank you.
We have one more card, and prior to this presentation, Commissioner Salas would like to do a kind of an introduction to what this is regarding. So Rocky Henderson, representing the Search and Rescue Council, you want to come on up to the table? Thank you.
Bring my sidekick, too.
Yeah, so Madam Chair and members of the committee, I've suggested that some search and rescue members of the council, Mount Hood Rescue Council, come and speak to us today, mainly with the goal, ideally, that we convene a meeting at least with the Board of County Commissioners and the Search and Rescue Council to come to some kind of closure and a means to accomplish really what their task has been for, or the request has been for about 5, 6, 7 years that I know of, and that is a facility to house a few of their delicate pieces of equipment or vehicles. So they have a lot of radio equipment, very expensive radio equipment, place to hang their gear and dry after a rescue, and ideally maybe some office space for them to have their meetings as well. The history with this also includes the fact that they provide approximately about over $2 million worth of volunteer services annually. And I think that's what really caught my eye, and I've been following their work for a long time. As I mentioned, the goal, I think it's also important that the information that they have here today with the Search and Rescue Council is really ideally to get a space to meet their needs, to house their material, as I mentioned, and perhaps we did have a meeting here in January with the Board of County Commissioners about some funding, and perhaps one of the things we can do is find a place that's ideal, find out what the market rate is and see what that gap is. I don't think it's really much of a funding ask for that gap, but we've had a communication breakdown. I think the meeting, as I requested, there was a request for a meeting from the Mount Hill Council in January, February, to meet with us, and I invited Rocky here today, or someone from the council, and Rocky was the guy. So I just want to say that this is basically a constructive meeting. We just want to get to the finish line, and thank you, Rocky, for coming. I'm the one who's responsible for them being here, so if you blame it on me.
Okay, your name and address,
Yeah,
please.
my name's Rocky Henderson. I live at 12480 Southeast Weiss Road in Damascus. Yeah, thanks, Paul, for inviting me. Just what I thought I would do just real briefly is give some kind of big picture, who we are, what we do. The Mount Hood Search and Rescue Council was founded shortly after the OES accident in 1986, where 9 people died on Mount Hood. Out of that mission, and I personally was involved in it, there was sort of an obvious need for better coordination of search and rescue groups. And so the Mount Hood Search and Rescue Council was formed with the primary intent of sort of doing after-action reviews and pre-action planning for search and rescue. We had different sheriffs, we had different sort of volunteer groups, and in that big event, it just became real obvious that we could do better. And so the Search and Rescue Council was founded. The bylaws were just basically, if you are a volunteer group that the sheriff uses on a regular basis, then you're invited to be a member. And then there were 3-4 counties, sheriffs that were involved, so it was kind of Mount Hood area. So that organization has been ongoing since 1986. It meets once a month, and it does its job of just, we get together and talk about what went wrong in the last mission, what we can do better to make the next mission go better. But we are a sort of a fragmented, diverse group because we have the ground pounding, we have the dog teams, we have the mountain rescue teams, we have the radio geeks, and we have the sheriff's deputies all sitting in the room together. And it's very productive because we can, sit there and talk about what went wrong and how to do it better, rather than, so that it does go better the next time, and we're not fighting in the back of the truck or trailer, in the middle of the night on the mission. So that's kind of who we are. But I just wanted you to get the picture of the diversity of the Mount Hood Search and Rescue Council. Each little group is its own tribe, is the way I would describe it. The mountain rescue team, which I'm involved with, we have our own little club, if you will. We train with our group. The radio guys, they train their group. But we all get together once a month, and we talk about what went wrong and how we're going to work better next time. So that's search and rescue world. What we need, and this is why we're here tonight, is we started reaching out to the counties, the sheriffs. Each group sort of has its own need. But as we talked in the Search and Rescue Council meeting, it's like, well, we have some common needs, and so maybe if we join hands together and kind of leverage our needs to the counties, maybe we can get some help. Now, real quick example, my team, the Mountain Rescue Team, in 1993, negotiated a deal with Multnomah County where they gave us property behind their sheriff's office, a lease, and we built a building. It's a really cheap garage, but we put our gear in there and we store our vehicle in there, and they lease it to us for $1 a year. And, you know, when they sell the real estate, we're gone. It's, you know, we're looking for a new place. And so that's sort of the impetus of what motivated us to work with the SAR Council, is we're going to need a new home because Multnomah County is going to, you know, they've abandoned the sheriff's office there, 122nd. They're going to sell that property or do something else with it. So we're looking for some home. So Mountain Wave, the radio guys, they're parking their buses and their rigs, you know, here and there and wherever they can put them. The other teams are just kind of, you know, making do. And so I just want to kind of make it clear what the search and rescue world in this area needs is a place to park our rigs in a dry, you know, garage, and we need storage for our gear, our ropes and all that stuff that doesn't fit in our trucks. And then we need a place that we can train on a regular basis, some classroom that has bathrooms and it's warm and dry. And so that's what we're exploring. You know, we all understand that the sheriffs, not the county commissioner, but the sheriffs are by statute responsible for search and rescue. That's their responsibility. And so we're clear on that. You know, different sheriffs in different counties in this state do it different. In Clackamas County, the sheriff has a bus and they train their deputies, but they don't buy any equipment for any of the ground teams or whatever. Deschutes County does it different. You know, they put a lot of money and they buy all the snowmobiles and they buy the stuff and they recruit and train their own volunteers. And so the county in Deschutes pays kind of more money to run their search and rescue groups. I'm just kind of saying in Clackamas, we kind of have a deal that, you know, our budget for my team, we raise all our own money. You know, we have a very supportive community that donates money to us. You know, my team costs about $30,000, $40,000 a year to buy ropes and gas for our trucks and so forth. The radio guys, they spent $100,000 on their truck, you know, at least, you know, and they get donated money. So we're just asking the commissioners to explore the possibility of some sort of facility that we can share and, you know, solve the problem that way. That's my little speech. I try to answer some questions, and I welcome a chance that, you know, we can continue this conversation to try to find some solution. That's all I'm kind of saying tonight.
Commissioner Bernard has a question or comment.
So first thing, do you offer classes to stupid people climbing the mountain? Well, I've climbed the mountain. So similar to mental health.
Yes, prevention.
Prevention.
Is key.
I have climbed the mountain 5 times.
Yeah.
I see people in their tennis shoes.
Yeah.
Coming down.
Yeah.
And in shorts and tennis shoes.
Yeah.
I've got crampons, ropes.
Yeah.
And I'm sun guard and
yeah.
I've seen it, and I climb with the Mazamas when I've done it, and I've done it with my brother a couple of times. That's one thing. Years ago, I tried to demand locators for mountain climbers, and you guys pushed back.
Well, yeah, we're not here to try to solve that
Oh,
problem.
I know,
but I understand.
But there was
you know.
a money available and ability to get locators.
Yep, and
because
we
you
did.
do lose people.
Well, yeah, the mountain locator unit is now kind of retired because that technology has kind of been surpassed by everybody with their cell phone.
No, but yeah, well, one thing I was trying to do is get a cell phone tower on the mountain.
That
so
would help.
that people
Yep.
could do that.
That would
and
help.
That's a good investment.
Yep.
The other thing is that we're not realtors.
No, I understand.
We're not going to go out and look for a
No.
building.
Right.
We've set $3,600 a month,
Yeah.
I think,
$3,000
to, huh?
3,000, 36,000.
Yeah, the month. Yeah.
36,000 a year.
To find a building,
Yeah.
find a building.
Okay.
And we'll talk when you find a building. Is that enough? But also, I can tell you that I just built a 2,100 square foot barn. By the time I'm done, it probably cost me $50,000. Of course, it's my land. One of the issues was, where do you want this building?
Right.
So I think you guys should go out and look. Maybe we have a piece of land. I know you might be talking, I don't know if you are or not, a piece of land, an opportunity. We'll continue on that, but find a building, get a price. And if we have anything, we used to think we had something, but Damascus Fire Department needed it more. But we're willing to do it, but I don't think it's our job to find a building. But there's also been a lot of confusion
Yeah,
over the
and
size and stuff. And
I'm hoping I can clear some of that confusion, some of our reticence, and that's why I sort of tried to explain our diversity.
I got
okay, the Mount Hood Search and Rescue Council is not an organization that is structured to own and manage real estate. It's just not. And so really, when the commissioners said go rent a place and whatever, we're like, whoa, you know, we're not really set up to kind of manage that. But we're all looking for some place to store our vehicles, and so that's why we're kind of just trying to explore every option. You know, ideally, if the sheriff had some sort of garage that, you know, that we could access, we just need sort of access. But we're you know, 6 or 8 different groups. We're 3 primary 4 groups that each kind of have their own specific needs. And so even if I've looked at some real estate, you know, as soon as I kind of find something, it's like, well, what does this group need? What does that group need? Are we going to kind of put a wall in the middle and let this group kind of manage that piece and this group kind of manage that piece? And who's in charge of kind of this and that? And
Well,
I apologize.
They need a
that
parenting organization.
thing you guys have to
Yeah,
figure out.
we'll solve that.
The other thing is, what are other counties contributing? Not these people come from Multnomah. They come from many counties.
Not just Clackamas. And in fact, Multnomah
Most of them.
is trying to solve their problem. You know, they've got a large search and rescue group has sort of similar to us. They're right next to us, and they're getting kicked out, or they're, you know, they don't have the homeless shelter now that the sheriff's office used to be their classroom, and now they're having to, you know, all those kids that are training are somewhere else, you know. So it's not just, we're not just trying to have Clackamas solve our problem. Multnomah, we all respond to Washington County, Multnomah County. We go to Mount Rainier, we go to, you know,
I didn't
all
know
over the
that.
state.
I didn't know
It's
that.
not just your problem, but we're, you know, the reason we're kind of looking for some help here is all of us probably drive and spend 3 hours of training for every hour we're on a mission. And so the demographics of our membership, if we had a training facility in Gresham, it would take an hour and a half for our Beaverton people to go there to go train. And so we're looking for a location. You know, you're in the real estate business.
No, I'm not.
Well, it's location. You know, I mean, ideally, I would want my search and rescue base in Reed College, because everybody would, you know, kind of be able to kind of get there easily, and it would be training wise, you know, getting to the mountain we got to drive there anyway.
Yeah, because one time we were looking at rhododendron.
Yeah,
But that's too
well,
far.
that's okay to park a rig and grab on the way when we go there.
Yeah.
But that's not okay if I say we're training Thursday night
Yeah.
and people from Scappoose are gonna go to Rhododendron to go train, you know?
Yeah, I would think the training's the easy part. I think we would have facilities that people would be willing to let you use.
I mean, we do use North Station.
Uh-huh.
We use the Mazama Center for some of our training. You know, that's not the problem. I mean, if it's close enough to where we can get to and get our gear there, you know, the reason that we sort of stubbed our toe, if you will, with your offer is just the challenge of it's not permanent, and we were afraid if we go out and lease a building and say, okay, let's park our garages there, and we do all this sort of leasehold improvement or something like that, and then something changes and it's, you know, so forth. I mean,
Well, ideally, if we have a piece of property and we could build a simple storage facility
Yep.
fairly reasonably located,
Yeah.
that would probably solve a lot of your problems.
Yeah.
I mean, my building's 2,100 square foot. I've heard different 3,000 to 7,000
3
square
to
foot.
5,000 sort of ballpark square footage, you know, to park
I
five,
mean,
6
for a,
rigs.
I have a nice barn.
Yeah.
I mean, I could live in it.
Why don't you lease your barn to 'em?
But so 2,100 square feet is quite a bit of room. So if you double that or went to 5,000, you'd have a pretty good sized building. I think my business was somewhere around 10,000 square feet, and that was a lot of square foot.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We have a couple more comments or questions from folks around the table. So Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I think we had a lot more depth than I anticipated. I just really wanted to just do a quick intro, but we've gone a little bit farther.
All right.
I want to say that, as I understand it, we do have a lot of people that get on the mountain who don't live in Clackamas County, but we do have a lot of the work that they do happens to be in Clackamas County. Sure. And the mountain in particular, it's the big draw. That's one of the major, and this weekend was no exception, with actually 2 separate rescues this weekend.
Yep.
So I wanted to point that out, and again, I think an opportunity to have a discussion in the near future and queue that up would be my goal for tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Fisher?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for what you do, and especially recently in the news when we've seen folks on the mountain needing help, and that there's been some success in
Thank you.
getting there, at
Yeah.
least at a minimum.
Right.
And I really also appreciate the meeting that we had a while back and building the relationship. So that's really
Yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, since then, has there been an opportunity for you to connect with the sheriff and see if there's opportunities there to use the space at the office there on Sunnybrook?
We haven't had direct meeting with sheriff, but it's on our radar for sure.
Good. Well, I think
Yeah,
that would be
we're
something-
going to push everywhere we can to try to solve our need problem, so.
I do really
No.
encourage
Yeah.
that. I enjoyed, Commissioner Savas gave us some background material, which was wonderful in looking at the responsibilities in the statute and the processes. And in reading that, it's very clear that the sheriff is a key partner. And
Right.
look forward to those continued conversations.
I've made the plea to the sheriff in the past on this, and I do want to point out that something in Section 404 of the state statutes allows for, if the county adopts it, is the opportunity for reimbursement to the public body offering search and rescue by the people who are benefited. So those who are rescued, there is an opportunity to recover some of those costs.
Yeah, but not much.
Not $500 max.
I was
Yeah,
thinking,
that
boy,
law, we call that the.
Gary Schmidt, we might need to have a statutory change there as I was reviewing that statute.
Yeah,
And you do how many rescues per year?
well, the SAR Council probably does over 100, you know.
100 times 500.
Yeah,
Well, there
well,
you go.
that law was put in after a rescue on Mount Hood. A state representative or senator from Hood River came down and said, by God, we got to do something for these stupid people on Mount Hood. And he went down to Salem and he tried to get this law through that's going to fine you $5,000. And we resisted that. The SAR community kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, you know. And so it became sort of what we call the incentive for stupidity, law, that the sheriff can fine you for being really, really negligent and recover $500 of cost. So that law is on the books, and we talk about it to sort of incentivize you to please think before you make a mistake.
Mr. Feely has a
Okay, I
comment.
wasn't going to comment, but now I have to.
Yeah.
So I've had property on the mountain for 30 years and followed the various search and rescues and the people getting into trouble. I won't use any adjectives to describe them. But I go back to my public finance training, and they're receiving a very large private benefit that the public's paying for. I mean, relatively few people getting this huge amount of public emergency response resources being chewed up. And it just seems to me that if the statute limits it to $500, it would be well worth looking at increasing that. Also, I wonder if there's some way to require a permit before people go up the mountain that's got like requirements for equipment or the way they're dressed, or anyway, I'll leave it at that.
And you could do that, and we looked at that, the locators, because you really got to kind of have somebody there to give them the locator, make sure they register and they have their proper equipment. But I got to tell you, I climbed the mountain with an expert a couple of times, and the expert fell in a crevasse right out of the parking lot of Timberline Lodge.
Whoa.
Even the best.
Yeah. The challenge with
he
charging for rescue or just making charging for rescue is there's a concern, I think it's real, that people won't call. Because I'm not calling a helicopter if it's going to cost me $5,000. I'll have my friends come and do it, and then you get into a different world. And so
that was the same argument on a locator.
But,
yeah,
I mean, they're the ones taking the risk. So
Mr. Magdalene
I
has
don't know if I buy that.
has a comment.
Good job.
What other types of rescues does the search and rescue get involved with? Though we're talking about the mountain, and I'm sure there's plenty of.
They're the one. The mountain is the one that makes the news, but Pacific Northwest Search and Rescue, we refer to that group sort of as the ground pounders, and those guys go out in the middle of the night looking for Alzheimer's patients who wandered away from the nursing home, and so they aren't negligent and risk takers. They're people who got in trouble, because of their mental illness or something, and so there's a lot of search and rescue that you never hear about in the news. The ones on the, live cameras flying around Mount Hood is the one that everyone remembers. Okay.
One final comment.
I was just going to add
Commissioner
that was
Barr?
the exact same argument about locators, that people would take greater risk because they had a locator. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. It's hard to define that. I can tell you too, though, that the Forest Service is seriously considering, and we expect in the next probably year or two, there's going to be permits required. And there's going to be a limit the number of climbers.
That makes sense.
Whether that makes it safer or not, it will pay for a climbing ranger or two rangers or whatever to be up there talking to climbers and checking their permits and so forth. So.
All right.
Thanks.
I climbed Shasta twice, which is another 5,000 feet.
Yeah.
And I saw people up there in T-shirts and jeans and tennis shoes. And as far as I'm concerned, they get in trouble. They should be paying a fine if you have to go rescue them. And they ought to be paying a serious one. And they should be using a locator if they're not with a professional climbing team. I'm sorry, but there's a difference between an Alzheimer's patient who gets lost through no fault of their own, and I certainly wouldn't expect anybody to charge them when you try to help them. But a responsible adult who acts irresponsibly, there's consequences for that.
No,
And if they
I
get
hear you
rescued-
very clearly, and I don't know if you're aware, but in Europe, the whole
Guys, this is
Europe,
very far afield.
you don't climb unless you have
Discussion
climbing
topic.
insurance. Everyone pays insurance, and the helicopters will be there in 20 minutes.
Mr. Magdalene, you have a
Because-
comment. Is it
because
relative to
there's
the
insurance
discussion
to pay for
about
them.
the budget?
I mean,
Thank you.
but that's going
I'm
to take
talking- no,
another
not-
generation before America does
I think
that.
we're
We
still,
can't-
I think you have still narrowed, you have narrowed too closely the window of what they're working on as a group. If somebody goes camping and their child goes away from the campground, they weren't negligent necessarily.
Exactly.
I think that you've got to look at the total cases that they're working on. What are, and they gave you a few other examples, but I think we've got hunters
yeah.
probably get lost once in a while. Mushroom pickers get lost.
Mushroom pickers are the best.
Right, I would think. They're looking
Mushroom
down.
pickers don't take
Don't eat the
locators,
mushrooms
and
till you
mushroom
get
pickers
home.
don't know how to use a compass. They just know how to look for mushrooms, you know?
Oh, God.
No,
Thank you,
very much
gentlemen,
for
very
your time.
much for being
I
here. We
appreciate
it.
I hope we'll continue to discuss
Yeah,
our.
thank you.
problems.
I am having no other cards of folks who want to speak. I'm closing the public hearing this evening. Budget committee members, is there any other discussion you wish to have this evening? Any direction you want to give to staff for any information that you would like to receive before Tuesday morning or by Tuesday morning when we get here?
We need to take our
Oh, it's
stuff because
Monday.
Yes, we do.
special district.
We're not here Monday.
They're not here, we are.
It's special districts on Monday.
Oh, okay.
You have hearings on Monday, we don't.
Yeah, so I asked that those specific asks that, was it NAMI? No, it was
Yeah.
NAMI had. Oh, maybe it was, yes, they had,
Incarcerated
they
parents.
had some funding from,
We're going to find out what the status is,
Yeah.
that the different departments that had done that this year had in the budget. So
Okay.
we'll find out.
Yeah, so from what I heard tonight, there were some pieces of information that we need to get more information back as we then on Tuesday look at those policy proposals and make determinations and other pieces of the budget. Is that correct, sir?
Well, just note that there's a $20,000 or $30,000 difference between what was funded last year from those different divisions and what the ask is, which is $250,000, not $220,000.
Yeah, so, and what that looks like is, because that was not funded as a policy level proposal
No.
in any prior years, it's something that the departments themselves cobbled together, and so we can take a look and see what we've done.
Yeah,
and
that's
what
what
we
it looked
can do.
like.
And that's largely under Rod Cook's leadership. And of course, it is something I'd like to see funded because it is a remarkable program, and particularly because of Debbie Marston's memory and how she worked so hard to get this.
Yeah.
well, there were
started.
4 funding
I know, yeah.
pieces, 4 departmental
Right.
funding things.
Well, interesting too, how the presentations this evening, most of them had a common thread about, well, first of all, housing and vulnerable people and how we need to help the citizens that live in Clackamas County, that's a basic responsibility and a basic expectation. So I thought that was all, very interesting. So if there are no other comments, no other discussion this evening, then we will recess this meeting, to Tuesday, June 5th at 8:30 in the morning.